Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the warm, wood-scented hush of an Edo-period Japanese bathhouse, where steam curls lazily through bamboo rafters, sandals clack gently against polished planks, and even the sound of water seems too loud. You're standing outside the sento, staring at a norin, a split curtain hanging over the doorway. It's a deep indigo color, faded by time with the kanji for you painted in white. It flutters slightly as someone exits, bowing faintly dry hair pulled up into a neat top knot. You hesitate, because yes, even this especially, this has rules, and they're not optional. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I also love knowing where you're listening from, so drop your city and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The curtain isn't just decoration. During the Edo period, 1603-1868, the norin was a literal sign of cleanliness. Bathhouses, it had government-inspected status, and proudly hanging this curtain let people know you were open and certified, but it also carried subtle clues. Blue indicated the men's entrance. Red was for women. A green one might mean family bathing hours, and if it's been lifted all the way up and tied at the sides, either you're too early or the boiler's given out again. You reach to touch it. It's rough to the fingers, thick with years of smoke, soap, and steam. It smells faintly of cedar and charcoal. Stepping through, you make sure to bow your head ever so slightly, even though no one's watching. It's just what's done. It shows humility, or at least plausible deniability, if you walked in on someone not yet decent. Historians still debate the origins of using norin this way. Some believe it evolved from kitchen cloths used in early sake shops to keep insects out. Others argue they symbolized purification barriers from Shinto tradition. You're not here to pick sides. You're here to not embarrass yourself. And this is only step one, because if you barge in too confidently, you might miss the pair of wooden geta clogs resting by the door, placed ever so carefully, with toes pointing out. This means someone inside is still bathing. You check your own geta placement. Are they aligned? Are they clean? Did you walk through that puddle on the way here? You suddenly feel guilty for no reason. There's something beautifully oppressive about Edo manners. No one yells, no one scolds, but the silence itself does most of the judging. Still, you breathe in deeply. The smell is nostalgic, though you've never been here. Wood smoke, wet towels, rice water, and something oddly floral, maybe from camellia oil, used by the women next door. Outside the curtain, the street was loud children running past tofu sellers, a distant clack of dice from a gambling den. Inside, it's muffled, intimate, calm. You hear the soft rustle of fabric, the drip of water from someone's elbow, a polite cough. You wonder who washed this curtain. Probably the bathhouse attendant, or their apprentice still expected to do it by hand, using cool water and ash soap so the dye won't bleed. One more thing to feel quietly guilty about how little you appreciate laundry. And just then, someone pushes out through the other side. An older man in a light cotton yukata bows without making eye contact. He adjusts his hairpin steps into his geta and walks away in perfect rhythm with the evening cicadas. You take his exit as your cue. You slip through the curtain and the world narrows to steam and shoji shadows. You've made it past the Norin congratulations. That's one of the many invisible exams you'll be taking tonight. And now you stand before your next challenge, removing your geta properly. Seems simple, right? Just kick them off and keep walking. But no. You pause at the edge of the wooden platform called the Genkan, the slightly elevated threshold that separates the outside dust from the inner sanctum. This tiny change in floor height might as well be a chasm, because crossing it incorrectly would announce you as a complete bathhouse amateur, someone who probably lets their towel drag in the tub and uses way too much water. So here's the test: your geta must be removed while facing away from the interior. That means stepping onto the edge of the Ginkan, turning around, sliding one foot out at a time, and carefully lining the sandals with the toes pointing outward toward the door, not into the room. Yes, it's a whole performance. Yes, you're now performing it with the finesse of someone tiptoeing across rice paper. Why the fuss? Because it's about the boundary between clean and unclean soto, and uchi, the outer and the inner. This isn't just about sanitation, it's philosophical. Removing your footwear correctly shows that you understand your place in the flow of harmony, or at least that you know how to fake it well. Mainstream records from the Edo period note that many bathhouses were initially open air or semi-outdoor, meaning your feet carried the whole world inside with you if you weren't careful. Thus, shoe etiquette evolved from necessity to almost spiritual choreography. And still today, scholars argue whether the obsession with shoe positioning emerged more from Confucian influence or from local Shinto purification practices that emphasized transitions between sacred and profane space. The answer, probably both, or maybe just the fear of being silently judged by a grandma with a washcloth. A young boy beside you fails this tiny exam spectacularly. He kicks off his geta with dramatic flair. They clatter against the wall, one landing upside down. A nearby attendant walks over and silently repositions them. The boy's mother does not look at him, which is somehow more terrifying than if she had. You try not to smirk. Stepping up into the changing area, you feel the smooth wood under your soles warmer than expected. Your feet remember this. It's as though every plank has absorbed centuries of footsteps, quiet conversations, nervous giggles, and the occasional snore from someone who overstayed their soak. To your left, there's a lacquered bench with a single towel folded neatly. To your right, another visitor is calmly adjusting her yukata, folding it with sharp corners like it's a letter to an old flame. You try to make yourself smaller, less visible. You realize too late that you're still holding your sandals awkwardly, like a tourist at a temple gift shop. A tiny silver bell chimes in the distance. Not for you, probably, but it adds to the theater of it all. Somewhere, someone is replenishing the fire beneath the water boiler, a job done mostly by apprentices called yuyaban, who spent their days hauling wood and not being thanked for it. There's a lingering smell of Edo-period Japanese cypress coming from the floorboards. You take another breath. Let your shoulders drop. You passed the geta test, mostly. Slippers. You didn't think this far ahead, did you? Because now you're in the changing room and standing in front of a small rack holding half a dozen pairs of communal bathhouse slippers. They're simple woven straw soles with cloth straps slightly mismatched, slightly damp from the last polite feet to wear them. And now you have a decision to make that shouldn't be this complicated. Do you wear them or not? The answer is maybe. Depending on the bathhouse, the time of day, the gender of the bather, your social status, the alignment of the stars, and whether or not your great-great-grandmother was watching, you glance around, hoping to catch a clue from the other bathers. One man walks confidently past the slippers barefoot. A woman picks them up, examines them, and sets them back down as if they've failed a test. A child grabs the biggest pair and pretends to skate across the floor until his older sister glares him into submission. You meanwhile hover in indecision, channeling the eternal human fear of doing something slightly wrong and becoming the silent story everyone else tells on their way home. Historically, indoor slippers, zori, weren't even consistently offered in Edo bathhouses until later in the period, mostly in the more upscale districts. Some bathhouses didn't provide them at all. Others insisted on them for hygiene. And still historians disagree on whether this etiquette developed from practical cleanliness or from upper-class mimicry, where commoners began imitating the habits of samurai households. Bathhouse etiquette, after all, was as much about aspiration as it was about ablution. You opt to skip the slippers, bold or foolish, but the wood feels warm and dry beneath your feet, almost reassuring. You shuffle forward past a sliding door etched with misty pine trees into the next stage of undressing. Here in this secondary threshold space, everyone moves slowly. There's no rush. No one is competing. It's as if the act of bathing begins with unhurried movement itself. To your left, a middle-aged woman folds her clothes into a basket with crisp precision. Her towel is tucked into her sash, just so. To your right, an old man, maybe in his 70s, carefully oils his elbows with camellia before even beginning to remove his inner robe. His movements are methodical, ritualistic, the way one might prepare for a tea ceremony or a duel, or possibly both. And then it hits you. You don't know where to put your clothes. There's a row of cubbies. Some have baskets. Some are empty. Some contain towels shaped into swans. You're not sure if you're allowed to touch them, so you do what any outsider would do in this situation. You mimic someone nearby and hope no one notices your very obvious confusion. You settle into a space on the third shelf, from the bottom, low enough to seem humble, high enough to avoid drafts. There's a delicate code at play here. Taking a top shelf screams arrogance. Taking the floor is either overly modest or just tragic. You wonder if someone's written a guidebook about this. They probably have, and it's probably printed on rice paper and only available through a book dealer who only sells to people who already know the rules. You fold your clothes neatly, or as neatly as possible, while trying not to sweat from the quiet pressure. The soundscape around you is all softness fabric, rustling a wooden scoop against a basin, the low rumble of someone humming an enka tune in a distant stall. You reach for your towel, just one, and suddenly the slipper dilemma feels a lifetime away. There's an art to greeting someone in an Edo-period bathhouse, a nuanced silent ballet of nods, glances, and very specific degrees of bowing. You know this now because you're face to face with the yuyaban, the bathhouse attendant, and they are giving you that look, not a glare no. This is a benevolent, all-seeing, mildly amused look that tells you two things at once. One, you're doing fine for a first-timer, and two, they've seen everything, literally. Hundreds of bathers, thousands of towels, more awkward wardrobe malfunctions than can be measured. So you do what you hope is the appropriate thing. A slow bow just deep enough to signal respect, but not so deep that it becomes theatrical. You hold it for 2 polite breaths. The attendant returns the bow with a nearly invisible nod, and just like that, you've passed another tiny test. Bathhouse attendants during the Edo period were often much more than towel hander outers. Depending on the bathhouse, they were responsible for fire tending, water temperature control, cleanliness, and most importantly, ensuring that no one broke the unspoken social contract of bathhouse etiquette. In some higher-end establishments, especially in the merchant-heavy districts of Edo, the attendant might even double as a conversationalist or storyteller. In others, they simply kept the peace through an arsenal of disapproving stares. Historians still argue whether these attendants were viewed more as servants' guardians or quiet enforcers of the public moral code. But one thing is agreed, they were never to be underestimated. The yuyaban before you wears a simple indigo happy coat tied at the waist. Their hair is drawn back in a no-nonsense bun, and they move like someone who can clean a tub, restock rice water, and shame a loud patron all in the same motion. You instantly respect them, maybe fear them a little. You shuffle a bit to the side bow once more, just in case, and proceed through the next sliding door. Now comes another choice you didn't expect to be difficult where to go. There's a partition ahead separating 2 wings of the bathhouse. The signboards above read Otokoyu and Onayu men's bath, women's bath. Simple, right, except it isn't. Because you've read stories about bathhouses that change wings at certain hours, or ones that reverse gender signage on specific lunar days, or even those with a secret third room reserved for elderly patrons who dislike noise, so you hesitate. Again, you glance back. The yuyaban is watching you with the serene patience of a fox, pretending not to be judging your entire existence. You choose your wing and slip behind the door. Inside is the araiba, the washing space. Wooden stools line the wall, each one paired with a small basin and a battered ladle. Buckets carved from cypress are stacked like miniature barrels. You step into the humid, fragrant air and immediately feel like you've entered a different world. The lighting is soft, filtered through paper lanterns and rising steam. Shadows move gently across the bamboo walls. There's an etiquette here too, of course, greeting fellow bathers, but it's not verbal. No one really speaks, not unless it's necessary. A nod, a breath through the nose, a gentle hand gesture if someone drops their soap bag. You follow suit, giving a slight bow to a man who is already washing behind his ears with great precision. He nods back, no words needed, just steam silence and shared understanding. The bathhouse is full of these tiny social harmonies, like you're part of a soft, sudsy orchestra where everyone knows the melody. And the yuyaban, they're the conductor. You sit at an empty stool, the wood warm and smooth beneath you. A basin waits. A ladle leans casually to the side. You don't realize it yet, but even how you scoop the water will say something about you, and the yuyaban will know. You sit a little lower than you expected, on a stool that squeaks softly under your weight. In front of you is a square wooden basin, well worn and damp from countless rinses. The air is thick with steam and the soft tang of soap root. You've reached the moment where you finally begin to undress your day literally spiritually, and with very careful choreography. Now, where to put your things? There's no locker, no door, just a shelf system lining the wall, each cubby open-faced and filled with an assortment of towels, bundles, cloth bags, and a remarkable number of neatly folded tenugi, those long, thin cotton cloths used for everything from drying off to shielding your dignity. You scan the cubbies. Some are clearly in use, others maybe not. One has a comb placed diagonally across the towel, which according to an old woman 2 stools down is the universal sign for this one's taken. You pick an empty one near the bottom, humble, unthreatening, politely neutral. You set down your tenugui first, then your folded yukata, smoothing the fabric in quiet reverence. Your underlayer goes next, followed by the tiniest parcel of camellia oil wrapped in wax paper. You hesitate over your coin pouch. Do you leave it? Take it? What if it gets wet? Historically, Edo bathhouses weren't exactly Fort Knox, but they weren't lawless either. Theft was rare, not because it never occurred, but because the bathhouse was a community microcosm. Everyone knew everyone else. If you stole someone's coin pouch, you weren't just a thief. You were the reason old man Hiroshi couldn't buy pickled plums for his wife, and that kind of shame sticks longer than any jail time. Some scholars debate whether the placement of belongings in the Edo bathhouse had encoded social meanings or upper cubbies reserved for elders or samurai. Did folded garments signal refinement versus rolled ones? There's no consensus, but you wouldn't be surprised if it's true. Everything else seems to carry unspoken rules. You glance over at another guest, an older woman with impeccable posture, tucking a small waxed cloth under her towel with origami precision. You try to copy her, folding your towel corner to corner. It doesn't look the same. You refold, still off. You give up and tell yourself you're going for relaxed casual. A small breeze rustles through the lattice walls, carrying the sound of someone pouring water from a ladle with almost meditative rhythm. You settle onto your stool and realize you've done it. Your belongings are put away. You're present, unclothed, and strangely serene. Now you pick up the tiny wooden bucket beside you. It's smooth-soaked, a little slippery. You scoop water from a nearby basin and gently pour it over your shoulders. The shock is real. The water is cold because, of course, you have to wash before soaking in the warm tub. You must arrive clean. The bath is not where you scrub, it's where you simply be. Another guest, a man in his 30s, watches you out of the corner of his eye, not rudely, just observantly. You're doing fine, he seems to say. Just don't dump the bucket too fast, and don't splash. Splashing is chaos. Splashing is childish. Splashing is how you get glared at by 5 people at once and haunted by the memory for years. You manage another rinse, this one smoother, controlled. You're learning. Maybe next time, you'll even bring your own tenugui in a proper indigo pattern, not one you borrowed from the inn. Progress. You glance back at the cubby wall. Your belongings rest neatly, as if waiting for the next version of you to return cleaner, quieter, wiser, and also somehow better at folding. So now you're damp, slightly chilled, and holding a wooden bucket. And here comes the part most newcomers rush, but not you. No, you're here to master the art of the pre-wash, because this isn't just a quick splash before you slip into the tub. This is the araiba, the washing area, and it has its own rules, its own logic, and if we're being honest, its own small-scale politics. And you're about to perform the humble yet sacred ritual known as the pre-wash dance. You lower yourself onto the short stool again, carefully, dignity first. You've got your bucket, your ladle, your towel, and a suspiciously small bowl filled with what appears to be mashed beige something. Don't panic, that's your soap. Sort of. In Edo-period bathhouses, commercial soap as we know it wasn't widely used. Instead, bathers relied on rice, brannuka, a gently abrasive powder left over from polishing rice. Sometimes it was mixed with water, sometimes with ash, or citrus peel, or even persimmon extract for added scent and mild disinfecting. Lather, not really a thing. You rub the soft paste between your palms and feel the gritty warmth bloom. Historians note that persimmon tannins were thought to banish body odor and even ward off misfortune, whether that's science or folklore. While scholars still debate whether Edo hygiene practices were based more on utility or superstition or both. Either way, you now smell faintly like a rice cracker. You start with the arms using the cloth to gently scrub downward in long, slow passes. No harsh scrubbing, no flailing. This is not a scrub your regrets off moment. This is measured, graceful, controlled. The man 2 stools down nods in approval. You pour warm water over your limbs, using the ladle, not the bucket. Why? Because buckets are for scooping and holding. Ladles are for pouring, mixing the two social chaos. Worse than wearing indoor slippers outside. Your back, however, presents a dilemma. You try a few awkward stretches. No good. Your shoulder blades remain stubbornly unreachable. And just when you're considering giving up a soft voice to your left. It's a wiry, elderly bather with a towel draped across his knees and a bamboo brush in hand. This is the ancient, unspoken bathhouse ritual of mutual back scrubbing. A sacred dance of truss politeness and shoulder angles. You nod, he nods, the trade begins. He scrubs gently, rhythmically. You're half tempted to hum along. Then it's your turn. His skin is thin, delicate. This is no place for overzealous elbow grease. You treat his spine like a scroll in a museum, sacred and slightly damp. Quirky detail. In certain parts of Edo, bathhouses became de facto networking spots. A well-scrubbed back could mean new business, or a future spouse, or according to one dubious 1804 guidebook, a good chance at discounted tatami mats. Connections were formed here under soapless scrubbing and shared silence. You rinse off one last time, careful to keep the water within your station. Splashing beyond your boundaries that's considered uncivilized, and worse, it might drip onto someone's carefully folded towel. You shudder. The steam rises around you, like fog on a riverbank. The soft echoes of ladles and light coughs fill the room. You've danced the pre-wash, you've survived the etiquette, you're clean, and now you may soak. You've washed, you've scrubbed, you've performed the bucket and ladle ballet. Now finally, you stand on the edge of the main bath, watching the water ripple gently in the dim glow of paper lanterns. And here's the surprise. No bubbles, no foam, no citrus-scented extravagance, no aggressively marketed 3-in-1 body wash. Just clean hot water, still slightly steaming with the faintest shimmer of minerals along the surface. Because in the Edo period, Soap wasn't exactly part of the soaking equation. Instead of lather, you're greeted by a basin infused with yuzuyu hot water, with floating citrus fruits during the solstice, or perhaps rice water left over from meal prep, rich with nutrients and clouded like moonlight. On regular days, it's often just water heated, filtered through charcoal, maybe steeped with hinoki bark or loquat leaves if the bathhouse has the budget. But suds never. Suds mean you didn't wash beforehand. The idea here is simple. The bath is not where you clean your body. It's where you restore your soul. You lower yourself in slowly, very slowly, because first of all, it's polite, and second, it's hot. Like I'm being cooked slowly for some reason hot. Edo bathhouses were famous or infamous for keeping their water scalding. So much so that travelers from Kyoto often wrote home to complain about how Edo men must have turtle shells for skin. Modern scholars still argue about the reason behind this absurd temperature preference. Some claim it was for sanitation. Others believe it was a test of character. If you couldn't handle the heat, maybe you didn't belong in the city. A fringe theory even suggests it was a competitive flex among neighborhoods. Oh, your bath is 42 degrees hours, boils the regrets right out of you. You wince. You sweat. You slide in inch by inch. The moment the water hits your belly, your soul briefly leaves your body and then returns confused but calmer. You sit, still, breathing slows, shoulders drop. There's no rushing in here. Everyone sits like statues, arms folded, towels folded, lives briefly folded away. No one speaks above a murmur. The water laps gently against the wooden sides of the tub, and even that sound feels like too much. A man across from you closes his eyes, perfectly balanced towel, folded neatly on top of his head, a classic bathhouse move that serves absolutely no practical purpose other than showing that you know what you're doing. You copy him. The towel sits on your crown like a tiny humid crown of achievement. It drips once. You let it. Someone shifts beside you. You glance politely. It's a woman sliding into the water with the elegance of someone who's done this every night since the Tokugawa shogunate was still figuring out taxation reform. Her hair is pinned. Her towel is dry. She nods slightly. You nod back. Everyone nods. No one talks. It's beautiful. Then a young man, not you, thankfully dunks his towel into the water with a splash. Gasp. Eyes open. The yuyaban appears. No words are spoken. Just a slow, disapproving stare from the doorway. The rule is simple. Your towel does not touch the water. Ever. Why? Because it's a public bath. The towel may have touched unclean surfaces, or worse, your armpit. Submerging it is like throwing your gym socks into someone else's tea. It's just not done. The towel stays on your head, or your shoulder, or folded on the side, but not under any circumstances in the water. You meanwhile are doing just fine. You're still. You're balanced. You've accepted that the heat is no longer pain, but poetry. Your pores sing, your muscles sigh. The room softens at the edges. For a moment, you are an Edo merchant, or a retired samurai, or a writer who just sold his 37th haiku to a fishmonger's wife. You don't exist outside this water. You don't need to. Just don't move too fast. Don't splash. And for the love of etiquette, keep that towel dry. The bath cradles you like hot silk, thick, soothing, and slightly too honest about your tolerance for heat. You're still now fully submerged up to the collarbone towel, balanced nobly on your head. You haven't moved in minutes, because moving implies you might cause a ripple. And ripples in Edo bathhouse culture are just another way to say I lack discipline. You focus on your breathing, slow, even, controlled, in through the nose, out through the mouth. You're not meditating exactly more, like performing a slow-motion survival act in a very polite sauna. Around you, bathers seem to hover in a kind of suspended animation. No one chats, no one fidgets. Even blinking feels like a rhythmic choice. Your hair begins to drip a quiet, traitorous rebellion. One bead of water rolls down your neck and hits the surface. Plip, you tense. Because here's the thing, Edo bathhouse etiquette is particularly unforgiving when it comes to hair. Wet hair is fine. Dripping hair is a crime. That water, it's considered contaminated the moment it leaves your scalp and re-enters the bath. It's not logical exactly, it's ritual. You carefully gather your hair and twist it into a loose bun, securing it with the faintest of tension. No hairpins, no bands, just you and the physics of soaked follicles. The goal is simple, contain the drips. According to Edo-period scrolls and illustrated bathhouse guides on Tiniest, there were actual diagrams showing how men and women should wrap or tuck their hair before entering the yu. Long hair was to be coiled and kept away from the water like a sacred scroll. Short hair combed down, slicked no strands adrift. Historians argue whether these drawings were instructional or satirical. Based on your current panic about one rebellious strand clinging to your temple, you vote instructional. The woman across the tub sees your struggle. She doesn't say anything. She just arches an eyebrow and lifts her own towel to dab her forehead gracefully, efficiently. She hasn't dripped once. She is clearly the bathhouse equivalent of a black belt. You imitate her. A soft blot, not a swipe. Controlled, elegant, maybe a little damp, but acceptable. Meanwhile, the man beside you has made the fatal error of wiping his brow and wringing his towel back into the tub. The reaction is swift, not explosive, just a ripple of disapproval that spreads like tea through parchment. Eyebrows raise. Someone exhales slightly louder than necessary. Even the yuyaban, still positioned like a guardian spirit near the door, subtly steps forward. No words are said. They don't need to be. The towel offender senses his sin and bows faintly in apology. His towel is now banished to the tub's edge, never to touch the sacred waters again. You, by contrast, are performing admirably. Your posture is still upright, back straight, knees bent at just the right angle. Your breathing has settled into the communal rhythm. Inhale as someone ladles water at the washing station. Exhale as it hits the floor with a whisper. In this moment, you understand what the Edo folk knew all along. Stillness is power. Movement implies need. But here in the bath, you need nothing. You're not improving yourself. You're not networking. You're not being productive. You're just present. And that's the whole point. You glance around carefully, without turning your head too much, and observe others in their soak. An elderly man eyes closed mouth, slightly open towel, like a folded cloud atop his silver hair. A merchant, judging by his calloused fingers and faint ink stains soaking his feet while humming an old festival tune. A boy, maybe 8, clinging to his father's side, learning the sacred silence one fidget at a time. You close your eyes too. You're floating now, not literally, but emotionally, suspended in that curious post-soak calm where thoughts slow and your bones feel like they've been reheated from the inside. But your back, your back still feels slightly unfinished, and as if summoned by your inner narrator, the man to your left turns slightly and gestures with only the briefest motion toward your shoulder blades. It's happening. The sacred bathhouse ritual, back scrubbing. You nod the universal sign for yes, but only if we keep this awkwardly respectful. He picks up a small brush, its handle worn smooth from years of use, and you lean forward just enough to expose your back while maintaining maximum nonchalance. Because this, after all, is not an intimate gesture. It's just communal exfoliation. In Edo-period bathhouses, back scrubbing was a normalized part of bathing culture, especially among male bathers. It wasn't about intimacy, it was about mutual care, civility, and in a way, hygiene diplomacy. You scrub mine, I scrub yours. No questions asked. Unless you scrub too hard, then there may be questions. The brush moves in slow circular motions, deliberate but gentle. The man doesn't speak. You don't either. Because here words would only get in the way of the rhythm dip brush rinse. Dip brush rinse. Fun fact. During the late Edo period, some bathhouses offered a back scrubbing service by attendants for a small fee naturally. These attendants were trained in the art of just enough pressure and knew precisely when to rinse, when to pause, and when to signal the session was over with a single clap. The practice was so popular that it even appears in woodblock prints, showing rows of naked customers receiving synchronized scrubs like a spa treatment supervised by a tea ceremony master. Scholars still debate whether this custom was more rooted in Confucian ideas of communal harmony or simply the result of practical necessity. Backs, after all, are notoriously hard to reach. Either way, you're not complaining. When it's your turn to reciprocate, you take the brush with reverence. The man leans forward. His back is a map of time. Sunspot scars a slight tremor in the shoulder blade. You copy the motions he used. Slow, circular, rinse and dip, rinse and dip. He sighs soft, almost imperceptible. The entire bathhouse has adopted this new rhythm, a kind of shared silence, broken only by the occasional water splash or the creak of wood as someone shifts. Even the yuyaban has disappeared for a moment, probably off folding more towels into perfect parallelograms. There's a strange dignity in all of this. No one's showing off, no one's flirting, no one's rushing. You're all just humans temporarily steamed, mutually respectful, and very lightly exfoliated. You hand the brush back. He bows slightly. You bow slightly more. There's an unspoken rule that the one who received first bows deeper. You both get dressed in your dignity and continue soaking as if nothing happened. And that's how it's supposed to be. Now that you've been properly scrubbed, both literally and metaphorically, you're ready for the next great challenge of the Edo bathhouse experience: navigating conversation. Or more specifically, learning the very precise art of not saying too much too loudly or with too many syllables. Because here in the you dialogue is a slippery thing. It floats like steam light, indirect, never pushing, and when words are spoken, they arrive in the form of sly observations, vague innuendo, or perfectly timed sighs that somehow convey entire subplots. You shift slightly, mindful not to splash, as two older gentlemen across the tub begin what appears to be a verbal duel of understatement. One comments on how the water isn't as hot as it used to be. The other responds with, perhaps the wood this morning was a bit soft. A third man joins in soft wood for soft bones, eh? They all chuckle, but not above a whisper. You realize they've just critiqued the firewood supply, the boiler apprentice, and possibly the local lumber market, all without raising their voices. In Edo times, bathhouse talk was a whole genre of performance art. You didn't make conversation, you wove it. You never gossiped, you implied. And if you insulted someone, it was best done with maximum politeness and plausible deniability, like referring to your neighbor's cooking as bravely seasoned or describing your rival's calligraphy as energetic. Historians still argue whether these verbal dances were a form of samurai-era restraint trickling down to the merchant classes, or whether it all grew out of living in very crowded neighborhoods with very thin walls. Either way, bathhouse banter became a quiet sport. The less you said, the more you conveyed. You recall one Edo guidebook supposedly advising speak in steam, not in fire. No one's ever found the original scroll, but it feels right. A woman nearby murmurs something about her neighbor's cat learning to open the rice bin. A man replies, a clever beast. Too clever, perhaps. She tilts her head. The meaning is clear. The cat is not the issue. The neighbor is. You consider contributing. You open your mouth. Close it. Perhaps better not. What if you accidentally imply the wrong cousin, or mispronounce the local magistrate's name, and wind up the subject of someone else's steam-laced story next week? Instead, you smile faintly and let your expression say, I too have opinions. I just keep them perfectly folded like a bathhouse yukata. Meanwhile, a child sneezes. Everyone looks not alarmed, but collectively deciding how to respond. An old woman breaks the moment with a soft, he's just letting out the mountain wind. Laughter bubbles up again softly. That child just got a poetic diagnosis, and he will probably never sneeze the same way again. You watch as another man enters the bath, nods to everyone in turn, and settles in with a sigh so expertly timed that it might have been rehearsed. The water shifts slightly to accommodate him, like an old friend making space. His towel is folded with the edges aligned precisely to the grain of the wood, clearly a veteran. He closes his eyes, says nothing. Everyone understands this man has probably seen things, possibly even owned multiple rice paddies. It's an education, this room, not in facts, but in tone, in the delicate art of presence, of knowing that the loudest thing you can do here is disturb the silence. You exhale, and the silence accepts you. The towel, your one constant companion through this quiet steam opera. It's with you now, folded neatly on your head, absorbing heat and broadcasting to everyone present that you understand at least one thing about bathhouse etiquette. But let's be clear, it's also a trap, because how you use that towel when where, and especially where not, can determine your entire reputation within these wooden walls. You glance around subtly, watching the veterans. Each one has their towel perfectly positioned, balanced atop the head, folded into a slim rectangle on the tub's edge, or draped across the knees like an obedient pet. Not a single one has their towel in the water. That is the line you do not cross. Why? Because bathhouse water is sacred space. It's been preheated, filtered occasionally, infused with herbs or citrus peel, and shared. Submerging your towel, whether by accident or ignorance, is like double dipping at a funeral. You might survive it, but not your dignity. You meanwhile are doing all right. Your towel is dryish, folded, behaved. You resist the urge to wipe your brow with it while it's still on your head. Another classic mistake. That's how towels slip. And once they slip, they fall into the water, into shame. During the Edo period, towels were a bit different. Instead of plush, fluffy rectangles, bathers used thin, cotton, tenugui, multi-purpose cloths used for drying, covering the head modesty, even as makeshift wallets. The less frayed your tenugui, the more your neighbors respected you. Some were dyed with family crests, others with seasonal motifs. The truly fashionable had theirs customized with calligraphy or subtle jokes. There's one anecdote about a poet who stitched a haiku into the edge of his towel so it would drip into the bath with every rinse. Scholars still argue whether this was poetic genius or hygienic disaster. You lift your towel and gently blot your neck. No wiping, no wringing. Just a light pat like you're dabbing a very nervous forehead before delivering a speech to the shogun. Beside you, a man in his 20s makes a mistake. He dips his towel into the tub just the corner and swirls it absent-mindedly. The sound it makes is delicate, almost apologetic, but the reaction is immediate. 3 heads turn, 1 eyebrow lifts. Someone exhales through their nose, loudly. The yuyaban appears seemingly out of steam and shadows. No words, just presence. The man freezes, lifts his towel out of the water, and folds it with exaggerated reverence. It's like watching someone place a cursed object back into a shrine. No punishment follows, just silence. The kind that settles around you like fog. You glance down at your own towel, still safe, still dry. You smooth the edges. You place it gently on your folded hands, and you vow never to let it betray you. There's a strange comfort in all this ritual. The towel, simple as it is, becomes a symbol of who you are in this space. A person who respects the boundaries, knows the dance keeps quiet, and doesn't swish their terry cloth into communal water like a barbarian. You lean back, eyes closed, towel steady. You've passed this test. You open your eyes just in time to realize you're about to commit another unforgivable offense, stepping into the wrong side of the bathhouse. Not the tub. No, you've mastered the soaking part. Well, towel disasters notwithstanding, this is about where you go next. And in the Edo bathhouse, your exit matters just as much as your entrance. Signs are posted above 2 low doorways at the far end of the room. One reads, Otoko Yu Men's Bath, the other Oniyu Women's Bath. Classic, right. Except both doors are open, steam drifting from each, and someone just came out of the left one, but they're not the gender the sign says they should be. You panic, because sometimes in Edo-era bathhouses, the wings would switch. Not arbitrarily, of course, on designated days, often called kokari bathhouses, would reverse gender signage to ensure fairness in access to the larger or more luxurious side. A sort of architectural equality movement, if you will. But it's not posted anywhere. You're supposed to just know. This would be a great time to ask the yuyaban, but they're nowhere to be seen. Likely folding towels into swans or judging someone's towel-folding aura from the shadows. You consider waiting to see which door others choose, but that would mean standing awkwardly half naked at a steam-covered fork in the road, like a lost ghost from a no play. Instead, you rely on your most reliable Edo-era tool, copying the oldest person in the room. An elderly man to your left slowly rises from the tub. He moves like a crane performing a tea ceremony, dignified, deliberate. You follow at a respectful distance. He chooses the right doorway. You follow. You live. This time. But gender wasn't the only variable in Edo bathhouse entrance politics. Status mattered too. Samurai were sometimes granted special hours or even private wings. Merchants and laborers bathed separately. Some bathhouses even had caste-specific soaking times. And if you happened to show up during one of these windows without knowing, let's just say wet sandals would be the least of your problems. Scholars still debate whether this separation was strictly enforced or merely suggested. Some argue that in smaller towns, practicality overrode social hierarchy. If you needed to wash, you washed. Others claim bathhouse attendants enforced the rules with silent but effective scrutiny, and we all know how terrifying silent scrutiny can be. You're through the right door, so stepping into a quieter wing lit by softer lanterns. This is the cool-down zone, a transitional space where bathers return to neutral temperature before drying off. The air is still thick with steam, but calmer now. The only sound is the occasional soft drip of condensation from a ceiling beam. You see a few figures seated quietly on low benches, sipping water or tea, dabbing their faces with dry cloths. One man is reading what appears to be a hand-copied newspaper, a privilege for the literate and the patient. A woman in the corner slowly combs her hair, each stroke timed with her breath. You do not speak. You do not move quickly. You just exist, quietly, like a cloud that's unsure if it should rain. You settle onto a bench, your towel folded beside you. A small bamboo tray offers slices of pickled radish and a pot of lukewarm barley tea. You help yourself, sipping slowly, your mouth still tingling from the heat of the bath. The radish crunches softly, cool, salty, oddly grounding. You made it through the bathhouse labyrinth. No wrong doors, no inner wing scandals. Just you, your tea, and the quiet sense that you're starting to understand why Edo people took their bathing so seriously. Because this wasn't just about being clean. It was about knowing the way through the steam. You're still warm, pleasantly warm, not simmering in a human soup, warm and resting in the cool-down zone like a well-behaved steamed bun. But the real trial lies ahead going back in. Because of course you're supposed to re-enter the bath. Once isn't enough. Twice is ideal. 3 times if you're ambitious or spiritually in need of a reset. But here's the catch. This time you need to navigate the temperature taboos. You return to the tub, slowly towel folded correctly, still dry, still loyal, and nod to the other bathers. You ease in. This time the heat feels sharper, not painful, but dramatic, the kind of heat that has opinions. See, Edo-period bathhouses were known for keeping water absurdly hot. In some regions, it was a badge of honor, proof that your neighborhood wasn't for the faint of heart or the thin of skin. Some claimed it was to sterilize the water. Others whispered it was to flush out evil spirits through the soles of your feet. Modern historians still argue the exact reason. Sanitation cultural machismo, early forms of thermal shock therapy. The answer is probably all of them, and also the stubborn pride of a city that thrived on stoicism and sweat. You glance around. No one else flinches. A boy of maybe 12 sits neck deep, stone-faced, while an older man beside him occasionally sprinkles yuzuyu peel into the water as if that citrusy scent will somehow make the boiling less obvious. You adjust. Slowly. Your legs tingle. Your ears redden. But you do not make a sound, because reacting too much to the temperature that's frowned upon and vocalizing discomfort, that's bathhouse heresy. You've heard the stories merchants who dared to say, "too hot aloud," were forever relegated to the beginner basin, which may or may not exist, but the shame definitely does. And yet there's a technique to managing the heat, one known only to regulars. First, don't move. Movement stirs the water and makes the heat worse. Stillness is insulation. Second, keep your arms out of the water. It helps cool the blood. That's why you see so many people soaking like noodles with elbows propped on the rim. Third, breathe through your nose slowly. Mouth breathing implies panic, and this is not the place for panic. You adopt the posture, still, elbows up, shoulders relaxed. You look like you belong, even if internally you're questioning every life decision that led to this glorified tea kettle. The woman across from you sighs a perfect, elegant ah that says, "I am one with the tub. I am home." You do not echo her sigh. You're still working on your composure. The bathhouse walls are starting to glisten with condensation, now dripping like a very slow rainstorm. The air is heavier, softer. You feel your pulse slowing to the room's tempo, and then miraculously you adjust. Your body stops protesting. The heat becomes a cushion. Your limbs, once defiant, now surrender. Your forehead glows. Your mind floats. You're not just tolerating the temperature anymore. You are the temperature. A distant bell chimes. Someone exits, steam curling in their wake like silk. You stay, because leaving too early would break the spell. And besides, you've earned this heat. You remain still, barely more than breath and intention suspended in liquid warmth. Time is folding in on itself. Has it been 10 minutes? 20 a lifetime since you sat down? Who knows? You're not even sure where your feet end and the bath begins. This is the state everyone talks about, but no one explains. You've passed into soaking stillness, and now all that remains is to breathe right. Because breathing in a bathhouse isn't just biological. It's etiquette, it's strategy, it's survival. You inhale through your nose, slow measured. The steam tickles your nostrils, carries the faint scent of rice bran and hinoki wood. You exhale through your mouth, soft, controlled, like you're trying not to fog up a mirror in front of a very judgmental calligraphy teacher. The rhythm matters. Too fast, and you signal weakness. Too loud, and you become that person. You've heard about that person. No one remembers their name, just that they once sighed audibly 3 times and were quietly outcast to the tepid foot basin near the firewood. So you breathe the way Edo bathhouse masters breathed, like a breeze gliding down a bamboo corridor. Light, respectful, rhythmic. Stillness is part of it too. Your arms are perfectly still, floating lightly at your sides. Your legs are tucked just enough to avoid invading someone else's space. Your posture is upright but not stiff, balanced, regal but humble. According to one 18th century bathhouse poem, the most dignified man is he who sits like a lantern's shadow, seen but not heard. You suspect this poet got kicked out for sneezing and needed to reclaim their honor. Even your face must obey this code, expressionless, calm. The trick is to look exactly like someone who's completely at peace, but not too at peace, lest someone think you've passed out and summon the Yuyaban. That's a whole separate etiquette disaster. There's a scholar theorist, really named Ishikawa Kohei, who once suggested that this controlled bathhouse breathing was a form of social camouflage. To disappear without leaving, he wrote, is the highest form of belonging. Whether he was being poetic or just a man who liked to nap in tubs without getting nudged, historians still debate. A man enters the bath and disrupts everything, just slightly. A tiny splash, a ripple, a sharp inhale. It breaks the rhythm, and for a moment, everyone recalibrates their breath, like monks returning to prayer. The room doesn't scold him, it just resets. The steam thickens in quiet judgment. You close your eyes. You count 5 full breaths. With each one, the outside world slips further away. No more errands, no more decisions, no more neighbors asking if you've tried that new miso. It's just breath and stillness. Even the thoughts in your head seem to bow and fall in line. The old woman who scolded a towel dipper earlier is now a silent presence across from you, her posture perfect, her aura one of benevolent disapproval. Her towel still dry, still folded, still judging. And then the silence deepens. It's not just absence of noise. It's a texture, like steamed fabric, like soft dusk over a koi pond. You become part of it, not a visitor, but a participant in the shared stillness. A fragment of calm breathing just right. You stay like this, breathing, existing, forgotten by time, until the next towel flutters. The flutter is soft, barely audible over the rise and fall of steam, but it's enough. A child has entered the bath. He's maybe 6 or 7, all knobby knees and cautious steps, holding a wooden bucket with 2 hands like it's made of glass. Behind him, his mother follows calmly, already scanning for potential breaches of etiquette. You can feel the collective focus of the room shift, not annoyed, not anxious, but alert. Because children in the bath, that's a whole different performance. You watch as the boy approaches the tub with theatrical solemnity. He bows much too low, then lifts one leg as if preparing to dive into an ocean. His mother gently taps his shoulder. He freezes, then remembers the first rule rinse before entry. He backs up, sits on a stool, and begins scooping ladlefuls of water over his legs like he's dousing a reluctant bonsai. Bathhouses during the Edo period were communal by necessity and design. That meant children bathed with adults, not just as a family activity, but as early training in how to be a human in public. This wasn't bath time. This was etiquette school disguised as hygiene. And if you learned wrong, everyone would know. And they would tell your aunt and your teacher, possibly your future in-laws. The boy finally finishes his rinse and tiptoes into the tub. He slips slightly, gasps. His mother does not react, because here, the lesson is this grace under scalding pressure. Once in, he sits beside her wide-eyed towel, perched unevenly on his head. It slides off. He grabs it, tries again. This continues for 5 repetitions until an old man across the tub gestures wordlessly how to fold it. The boy copies him. It holds. The man nods once the rite complete. Scholars of Edo society point to the bathhouse as a microcosm of social conditioning. Children learned not through lectures, but through observation. No one told them the rules. They breathed them in with the steam. That's still true. The boy's eyes dart around, watching everyone's posture. He mimics how his mother holds her towel. He copies the way another man exhales. He notices you legs folded neatly, eyes soft, and sits a little straighter. It's not just about behavior, it's about presence. Even the smallest bather is expected to contribute to the calm. A fringe detail in some districts. Children were taught specific bathhouse rhymes, soft rhythmic verses, to help them remember the order of actions. A towel dry hair high back to the wall, don't let it fall. One historian claims a particular chant included the line, "Speak no louder than the steam can hear." That scholar later admitted he may have made it up, but honestly, it should have been real. The boy reaches for his bucket and pours a little water into the tub, a harmless gesture, but his mother gently removes it from his hands. Buckets are for washing, not soaking. He nods solemnly. Another rule absorbed. The room accepts him now. He's not a disruption. He's a new instrument in the orchestra of hush. He leans back, exhales, and for the first time you hear the tiniest whisper, "Quieta." And in that moment, the tub becomes a classroom again. Steam rises in steady swirls as you watch the boy settle into stillness, his towel finally staying put, his shoulders learning the geometry of calm. And in this quiet haze, you become more aware of the invisible architecture around you, not of wood and stone, but of modesty, not prudishness, not shame, but a deeply intentional, almost artistic sense of how to exist alongside naked strangers while preserving dignity. It's a performance made entirely of posture steam and knowing where to look and where not to. Welcome to the unspoken rules of modesty and steam. You've likely noticed by now that no one is particularly concerned with hiding their body, and yet paradoxically, no one is exposing themselves either. It's not about covering up, it's about presence. You learn to sit a certain way. You angle your body not away from people, but with the steam, the shadows, the light. You don't make eye contact while standing. You certainly don't stretch. In Edo-period bathhouses, modesty wasn't enforced by screens or barriers, but by ambiance, warm mist, minimal lighting, and a shared understanding that seeing does not mean looking. In fact, illustrated bathhouse guides of the time often emphasized how shadows from lanterns and well-placed bamboo slats helped create privacy without needing to build walls. Historians still discuss whether this practice stemmed from Shinto ideas of naturalness and purity or from sheer practicality in a country where communal space was always tight. Either way, you quickly learn modesty here is like calligraphy. It's all in the stroke. You shift slightly, not because you're uncomfortable, but to align with the rising steam. It flows over your chest like a silk curtain. The towel remains folded on your head, serving less as a cover and more as a quiet signpost. I know what I'm doing. I belong. Nearby, a woman with hair like polished obsidian adjusts her yukata sleeve before folding it back again. She's not undressing, just preparing to rewrap herself once dry. Yet the movement is exact, restrained, elegant. You try not to stare. She notices, doesn't flinch, just breathes steady, grounded. Even among strangers, there's an intimacy here that never crosses into discomfort. You've become part of the fog, a silhouette, not a spectacle. And then comes the test. A man young, maybe early 20s, rises from the tub, a bit too confidently. His towel slipped. He stretches, arms above his head back, arched a full-bodied salute to chaos. It's not grotesque, just loud. Loud in posture, loud in energy, loud in how everyone else suddenly becomes very interested in their fingernails, their towels, or an invisible point in space slightly above eye level. The yuyaban doesn't appear. They don't have to. The silence thickens. The man senses it. Slowly, he lowers his arms. He sits. He doesn't stretch again. You exhale quietly through your nose, like a proper ghost of etiquette past. There's something oddly beautiful about this silent contract. No need for signage, no need for rules printed on tiles. Just people being people in a very particular way, taught not with words but with the weight of steam and centuries. You adjust your posture, angle your knees, and let the modesty fold around you like a second towel. Invisible, unspoken, perfectly in place. You've reached the point in your bathhouse journey where the steam doesn't just rise, it listens. Words move differently here, and as you lean back against the wooden rim, something drifts through the mist, a voice low and slow, telling a story about a merchant's runaway horse that somehow ends with a turnip shortage. You don't know who's speaking, you don't know who they're speaking to, but you do know gossip travels fast in fog. That's the thing about Edo-period bathhouses. Privacy was never about secrecy. It was about subtlety. Everyone heard everything. They just politely pretended they didn't. You glance around the tub. The story continues now. It's about a rice delivery that never arrived, and someone's cousin who might have eloped with the miller's son. It's all delivered with the gentlest cadence, almost like a lullaby. No names are mentioned, no accusations are made, just steam-thin innuendo and well-timed pauses. In Edo times, bathhouses were more than hygiene centers. They were community information hubs. News rumors, weather forecasts, romantic entanglements, all passed through the bathhouse filter. This was social media with ladles. If someone slipped and cracked their knee on the bathhouse steps, 3 towns would hear about it by nightfall, and someone in the 4th town would swear they were there. There are Edo-era pamphlets, satirical probably, that describe bathhouse gossip as stories too slippery to grab, but too juicy to ignore. Scholars aren't sure if these pamphlets were read for comedy or used as training manuals. Either way, you're hearing the real thing now. The voices remain low. No eye contact. Just one bather murmuring another, replying with a single syllable that somehow means continue. But now tell me about the fishmonger. You pick up fragments. A kimono that went missing. A girl who sings too loudly during evening tofu deliveries. A vendor whose miso has been getting suspiciously watery. You know exactly who they mean, and you've never even been to this town. The fog holds it all. Steam is the great equalizer. It blurs status, gender, wealth. Everyone's naked, everyone's warm, and everyone's slightly nosy. The boy from earlier sneezes. The old woman beside him responds, "Ah, must be all the rice sacks whispering again. You don't get it. You don't need to. It makes perfect sense in this room." You think about speaking, maybe adding your own faint commentary about how the radish vendor seems to vanish every full moon. But you stop yourself. Not yet. You haven't earned your place in the gossip chain. Not until someone says, "Ah, and did you hear what the new one said?" and they mean you. That's when you'll know you belong. The voices drift on. They don't rise. They don't fall. They just float, bouncing off the water and between ribbed bamboo slats like verbal incense. You hear the story of a monk who forgot to dry his sandals and was visited by 3 foxes in a dream. The punchline: one of them sold pickled eggplants. No one laughs, but everyone's smiling. You close your eyes and let the fog do the talking. The mist thickens as you sit quietly drifting between layers of heat and half-remembered gossip. But in the other wing of the bathhouse, beyond the slatted screen and the flickering shadows, something different is unfolding. Because in the women's bath, modesty takes a new shape, and here in the hush behind the bamboo hair rituals become their own quiet ceremony. You glimpse it briefly as you pass near the partition on your way to refill your bucket. A low wooden bench, dim lanterns, and women seated in rows, combing out long, inky strands with the focus of calligraphers. Not hurried, not vain, just careful, intentional. As if hair were not merely hair, but memory spun into thread. In Edo-period women's baths, hair was a kind of language. How you cared for it, tied, it scented it. These things said who you were. A merchant's wife might use camellia oil for its shine. A kabuki actor's sister might braid in a ribbon of color. A widow might rinse hers in cooled rice water, thickened like cloudy tea as a quiet nod to tradition. You pause out of sight and listen to the slow drag of wooden combs through water-heavy hair. The rhythm is hypnotic. A comb lifts, a strand parts, a quiet splash, then another. No chatter, just presence. It's not just hygiene, it's inheritance. Many women learned their bathhouse hair routines from mothers, aunts, neighbors. There's even a folk tale about a girl whose comb used daily in the bath grew warm enough to hold secrets. She'd comb her dreams into it, bury it in rice husks. One day it bloomed. Scholars are divided on whether these stories are symbolic of femininity, social constraint, or just very creative marketing for regional comb makers. But you don't care. You like the idea of a comb that remembers. One woman massages oil into her scalp with tiny circles. Another uses a towel to blot the ends, never wringing, never snapping. You imagine her hair will dry like silk thread stretched on a loom. Some of the older women tuck their locks into buns and wrap them in protective cloth, setting them like heirlooms for the walk home. In this space, hair is a part of posture, identity, and etiquette. Wet hair left untamed suggests chaos. Hair brushed too briskly implies you're late, or worse, indifferent. But combed gently with reverence, that's grace. You feel your own hair still slightly damp, curling where you forgot to smooth it. A rebellious strand clings to your temple. No one has commented, but the steam knows, and so do you. You tiptoe back to your station, quieter now, calmer, as though you've witnessed a tea ceremony for the head. As you settle back into your spot, you realize something no mirrors. not a single reflective surface in sight, because appearance isn't the goal. Care is, and the way they tend to their hair, with silence, with patience, with slow exhalations that seem to float along each stroke of the comb, it becomes something more than grooming. It becomes grace in motion. There's a hush to this part of the bathhouse deeper than the earlier silences. It's the kind of quiet that means the sun is slipping low outside, and the last of the light filters through paper screens in long golden lines. You shift slightly, still warm from the bath, still scented faintly of cypress and steamed barley, and just when you think you've learned all the rules, when you feel confidence still balanced, a nearby whisper stirs the air like a warning bell. They've reinforced the wall again. You pause, because now comes the oldest and most whispered legend of Edo bathhouse life, the peeping problem. It sounds like something out of a folk tale, but make no mistake, bathhouses in the Edo period had to deal with an issue as timeless as steam and sandals people trying to sneak a look. Not always men, not always strangers, but always unwelcome. And so, across bathhouses, large and small city or countryside, came a wave of countermeasures. Double panel screens, slatted wooden walls angled just so, stone-lined trenches, too wide to lean over, too narrow to cross, and of course, the yuyaban, who became half bath attendant, half watchful guardian. Historians still debate just how widespread this phenomenon was. Some claim it's exaggerated, a product of woodblock print satire and dramatic fiction. Others point to arrest records and legal notices nailed to bathhouse doors, warning of wandering eyes and unacceptable ladders. Yes, ladders. There are documented cases of individuals, usually teenagers emboldened by sake and poor judgment, who attempted to scale exterior bathhouse walls using delivery carts rope or stacked crates. The punishment, public shaming, temporary exile from communal baths, and in one notorious case, being forced to clean all the buckets with a toothbrush-sized reed brush by hand for a week. You glance at the partition wall near the women's wing. It's simple wood and bamboo reinforced with narrow slits for ventilation angled so that light can pass but lines of sight cannot. It's brilliant, ingenious, completely non-negotiable, and yet the stories persist. A whispered tale about a noodle vendor who disguised himself as a charcoal delivery boy. Another about a failed samurai who tried to write poetry while peeking, claiming it was in the name of art. That story ends with his brush being confiscated and his haikus rewritten by a particularly bitter bath matron. Even now, someone across the room mutters, "The wall used to be lower," and the man beside him, not even looking up, replies yes, and that cousin doesn't visit anymore. No names, no details, just implication wrapped in steam. You shift your towel again carefully and realize modesty isn't just about how you carry yourself. It's also about what the room chooses to see or not see. You think about the women in the other wing, calmly brushing their hair, trusting the walls, the steam and centuries of silent enforcement to protect them. And you think about the yuyaban always present, when needed always watching, not to invade but to preserve. Guardians of the unspoken trust that makes a place like this possible. So you stay quiet, you nod to no one in particular, and you let the mist erase the memory of ladders and foolish boys with poems in their heads. You step out of the bath now, slowly, reverently, like you're leaving a shrine. Your skin hums with residual heat. Your towel floats down from your head like a retired crown, and the world around you regains shape as the steam begins to clear. You've done it. You've soaked, scrubbed-breathed, bowed, and not once violated the sacred towel rule. And now it's time for a snack. Because Edo-period bathhouses weren't just for bathing, they were full-body experiences. And that experience included bathhouse snacks. As you move into the yoinoma, the cooling down room, you see them low trays on bamboo mats, each holding humble but precisely arranged delights. Slices of takuan pickled daikon radish cut into thin yellow moons. A small bowl of roasted soybeans still warm. Cups of amazake, the sweet, faintly alcoholic rice drink, served lukewarm and thick as comfort itself. You choose a place to sit near the window, where the bamboo blinds sway gently in the evening breeze. A paper lantern flickers above, casting honey-colored light across the woven mat. You pick up a radish slice. It crunches just right, sharp, sour, briny. Perfect contrast to your steamed serenity. Historically, bathhouse snacks served multiple purposes, replenishing electrolytes, though they didn't call it that, grounding your spirit and providing a final gentle social ritual before leaving. Eating, like everything else here, had rules. You didn't rush, you didn't speak with your mouth full, and you never ever brought your wet towel to the snack mat. That's how feuds started. Interestingly, many Edo bathhouses formed partnerships with local vendors. The tofu seller might supply soft cubes for miso soup, ladled after night baths. A confectioner might deliver rice cakes on bamboo leaves, especially during festival weeks, and in at least one recorded case, a nearby mochi maker invented a steam cake that allegedly cured melancholy. Historians believe it mostly cured bad moods related to hunger. You sip your amazake. It's warm and soothing, like rice pudding melted into a hug. A few grains settle at the bottom of the cup, gently swirling with each tilt. It's a little sweet, a little funky, perfect. Others around you do the same. A woman fans herself with a folded towel, dry, properly folded. An old man counts soybeans with the focus of someone solving a Zen riddle. A child is given a bite-sized plum and chews it with cartoonishly solemn dedication. You notice no one says much. Snacking like soaking is a meditative act, and just when you think this is as peaceful as it gets, someone begins playing a shamisen in a corner near the exit. A soft, plucked rhythm, nothing dramatic, just a few notes sliding gently over the room like another layer of mist. You imagine Edo merchants coming here after long days in the market, slipping into water, drying under cedar beams, and crunching the same pickled radish you're holding now. It's humbling and oddly comforting to be part of that lineage, to be one more body moving through the quiet rituals of care, silence, and salted soy. You finish your drink, gently set the cup down, and bow faintly to the snack mat. You're not just clean now, you're restored. You've eaten, you've soaked, you've nearly evaporated from the inside out. And just when you think nothing could be more tranquil than warm rice drink and whisper-level gossip, the air in the cooling room shifts. Not colder, not louder, just lighter. Because now, woven between the rustle of yukata fabric and the low creak of bamboo slats, something unexpected is happening. Flirting, bathhouse style. Don't panic. It's not overt. No one's winking or flexing or reciting poetry about collarbones. This isn't a drama scroll, it's something subtler, slower, the kind of flirting that's been passed down not by guides or rules, but by towel folds, eye glances, and just the right amount of extra time tying a sash. Across from you, a young woman adjusts the edge of her yukata, 3 times once too many. She looks up briefly, not at anyone, but everyone notices. A man near her shifts slightly, places his sandal back on the mat with suspicious precision, and runs his fingers through his hair as though checking for alignment rather than charm. You sip your tea pretending not to observe, but you're watching. Because this isn't just a social cue, it's a full conversation in slow motion. In Edo, bathhouses flirting was allowed in theory, but only in the same way that chess is just a game. You had to be clever, courteous, and so indirect that if someone accused you of flirting, you could truthfully say, "Me, I was simply adjusting my towel with great dignity." There's a well-known anecdote about a woman who expressed romantic interest by offering a stranger her camellia oil. He misunderstood and thought she was commenting on his ashy elbows. They never spoke again. And yet, bathhouse romances did happen, usually beginning with nothing more than a glance across a basin or a shared appreciation for radish crispness. Courtship was silent, conducted through subtle, mirroring folding yukata sleeves, the same way leaving the cooling room at the same time or choosing identical flavor plums. Scholars argue whether these rituals were sincere gestures or simply a game, a way to practice grace and poise under the eyes of many, perhaps both. In a society where public displays of affection were considered dramatic at best and scandalous at worst, the bathhouse provided a rare window of suspended rules. The young woman moves again. Her fan opens with a quiet snap. The man adjusts the tie of his yukata, just a hair too slowly, and then nothing more. That's the beauty of it. The moment exists, then it passes. No notes exchanged, no names shared. Just a soft flutter in the steam and the smallest acknowledgement of, "I see you, and you noticed." You recall a proverb from the era. Love, like steam, rises quietly and vanishes without apology. You're not sure who wrote it. Probably someone whose towel never fell. Nearby, someone chuckles softly at a joke only 2 people heard. 2 cups touch. A sleeve brushes past another, and still the flirtation never becomes a scene. You smile into your cup, because even here, in a room built for calm, the heart finds its little dramas. The bathhouse is dimmer now. Lantern light flickers softly on the damp walls, casting long shadows that sway like old stories retold. Outside, the cicadas have quieted, replaced by the occasional hoot of a night owl or the creak of a cart's wheel far down the road. It's late, and that means you've entered a new phase of the experience, one rarely spoken of in the guide scrolls or city maps. This is the time for night baths and ghost stories. You feel it first in the change of the air. Cooler now. Not cold, but enough to raise the hairs on your arm. A hush settles over the room, not imposed but agreed upon, as if everyone feels the bathhouse has shifted into sacred twilight. In Edo times, many bathhouses stayed open well into the night. Workers arrived late after the market stalls closed, or the fish were packed in salt. Travelers stumbled in at dusk, weary from walking their packs, heavy with road dust, and temple offerings. And with nighttime came the old stories. You overhear one now. A woman whispers to another as they towel their arms. The lantern in the left corridor flickers whenever the fox wife returns. The listener nods, slowly unstartled. This is not unusual. Bathhouse ghost tales were as much a part of the experience as the bath itself. You'd hear about a towel that never dried, no matter how long it hung, or a man who entered to soak but was never seen leaving, or steam that gathered in the shape of a figure always just behind you. These stories weren't meant to scare. Not really. They were lullabies with claws. A reminder that the world was thin at the edges, and bathhouses, places of nakedness, quiet, and reflection, were thin spots indeed. In one neighborhood near Ueno, people swore a certain bathhouse had a mirror that didn't reflect those who'd lied that day. In another, a ghostly child was said to splash in the tubs late at night, never asking permission, never drying off. Historians debate whether these tales were born of superstition folklore or simply the hallucinations of people who had soaked too long and drunk too much warm amazake, but their staying power undeniable. You feel it now, the eerie beauty of the moment, the quiet so deep it begins to hum in your bones. The shadows flicker just so. You look behind you, not out of fear, just curiosity. You're not alone in the thought. Everyone sits a little straighter. No one speaks above a whisper. Even the child from earlier presses close to his father, towel clenched like a talisman. You imagine an Edo storyteller seated here long ago, spinning yarns to sleepy bathers about lantern spirits' hair that moved without wind, or a haunting that could only be cured by soaking in exactly the right temperature water for 77 minutes. You'd listen, of course you would, and maybe you'd dream later of a fox wife, or a laughing ghost, or a disappearing towel. You slide further into your yukata, now slightly chilled by the night. You sip the last of your tea. The steam curls upward, and just for a second forms the shape of something with eyes. You blink. It's gone, but the story stays. The steam has thinned, the air cooled, and you're wrapped now in the soft embrace of your yukata cotton, warm from your own skin sleeves, swishing like rustling pages of an old novel. You walk slowly through the final corridor of the bathhouse, footsteps silent on the polished wooden floor, and waiting for you near the doorway, your robe. Not just any robe, the yukata unassuming but essential. In Edo-period bathhouses, the yukata was more than a cover-up. It was an announcement: I've bathed. I've done things properly. I am part of society again. You lift it from its peg and let the fabric unfurl. It's simple indigo-dyed cotton with a faint pattern of river reeds and distant cranes. You slip your arms through fasten the sash with practiced clumsiness and feel the shift in posture immediately. You're clothed again, but not in layers or armor, just fabric and ritual. In most public bathhouses, yukata were provided thin ones, usually washed that morning, still faintly smelling of hot water and rice starch. But regulars, they brought their own. A personal yukata signaled familiarity, taste, and sometimes ego. Merchants wore stripes. Poets leaned toward faded florals. Apprentices stuck with plain white, hoping not to sweat too much on borrowed linen. And for the truly stylish, there were custom-mon crests stitched inside the collar, hidden, seen only when hung on a hook or folded just so. You glance around. Others dress quietly. A man ties his obi sash with a bit more flourish than necessary. A woman adjusts her collar to just the right slope of shoulder. Any higher, and it's modest. Any lower, and it's scandalous. It's a dance of millimeters. Scholars still debate whether the yukata's rise in popularity came from bath culture or summer festival fashion. Some argue it was adapted from under kimono layers worn during fireworks season. Others claim the bathhouse led the way, making cotton robes not just functional, but a casual alternative to formal silks. Whatever the origin, you're glad for it. The robe feels earned like a soft badge of honor for having survived the boiling waters and the endless etiquette gauntlet. You tie your sash poorly and retie it better. You see someone nearby folding their towel into a long band and tying it around their waist under the robe. Not necessary, but a sign of someone who really knows what they're doing. You tuck that detail away for next time. Someone else slips a small pouch of fragrant herbs into their yukata sleeve, a bathhouse scent souvenir. Camellia, enoki, maybe a hint of roasted tea. You wish you'd thought of that. You walk toward the exit. Footsteps muted robe, brushing your calves like a breeze that belongs to another century. And just before you step outside into the evening air, you notice a lone yukata left hanging, empty, forgotten, or maybe just waiting. You don't ask. You bow to it softly, because in the bathhouse, even the empty robes deserve a little respect. You're nearly done now. Robe secured towel folded under your arm like a final act of humility. The bathhouse is quiet behind you, the night crisp ahead, but just before you cross that final wooden threshold into the street beyond, you pause, because one final layer of ritual remains one invisible to outsiders, but deeply understood by the regulars. Bathhouse hierarchies. No one talks about it, not directly. There are no signs that say, sit here if you're respectable, or this bench is for those with rice fields. And yet, every inch of the bathhouse is gently ordered, not by force, but by centuries of quiet knowing. You think back to where you chose your stool. It was on the left second row, not too close to the entrance, eager, not too deep in the corner, avoiding. It was the safe zone, used often by guests or younger visitors. But the man with the combed silver hair, he sat far corner lowest bench. That's a power seat. It's the kind of place where posture is its own introduction, and no one dares splash. You realize now that others subtly adjusted around him, not in fear, but in deference. In Edo-period bathhouses, physical space spoke volumes. Samurai typically sat where they couldn't be surprised, backs to the wall eyes on the room. Merchants claimed the center to be visible, approachable, networkable. Artisans stayed near the drying racks, convenient, efficient, respectful, and apprentices always near the entrance, always ready to move. Women's wings had their own codes, based on age, marital status, social ties. A young wife might sit beside her mother-in-law, learning the proper bath etiquette through imitation. A widow might choose a quieter corner to dry her hair away from the chatter, but still present. You recall a popular bathhouse anecdote about a traveling monk who sat too close to the boiler one night. When asked why, he replied, "The heat burns the ego out faster." He was never questioned again. Historians argue whether these unspoken arrangements reinforced class structures or gently eroded them. After all, in the bath, Everyone is stripped of their outer signifiers, and yet even naked people find ways to signal who they are. Take towel folds, for instance. A diagonal fold traveler, triple fold with a twist retired military, folded over the elbow and untouched aristocratic, possibly annoyed. And then there's silence. The more seasoned the bather, the less they speak. It's not aloofness, it's mastery. In Edo's best bathhouses, the truly respected elders might go an entire visit without saying a word and still leave having taught 3 lessons. You step aside to let an older woman pass. She bows. You bow deeper. It's not forced, it's rhythm. You're part of it now. Outside, wooden sandals clack softly on the walkway. Someone ahead stops to adjust their sash. Another tucks a comb back into their sleeve. You fall into step, the bathhouse fading behind like a hot dream. But you carry it with you, the stillness, the steam, the layers of unspoken knowing that make up this floating world. You didn't just bathe, you ascended a staircase made of etiquette. And tonight, for once, you didn't trip. You step outside. The air hits your skin like a gentle rebuke. Cool, crisp, a reminder that the world still turns, that steam doesn't last forever, and that yes, your hair is still a little damp behind the ears. But you don't shiver. You're warm from the inside out, not just in body, but in ritual. The bathhouse door slides shut behind you with the quiet finality of a last page turning. You walk a few paces down the path, past the lanterns, the moss-covered stepping stones, the faint scent of wet pine. You hear sandals scuff behind you, a gentle conversation, a single cough. You don't turn, you just keep walking slow and quiet, because this is the final etiquette, leaving quietly, always quietly. In Edo-period bathhouses, exits were treated almost like small ceremonies. You didn't wave goodbye. You didn't shout thanks. You bowed gently toward the entrance, and if the yuyaban was visible, just a shadow behind the curtain, you bowed to them too. Not out of obligation, but recognition. They kept the steam in order. They folded the silence when no one else could. You stop at the ghetto rack. Your sandals are there, just as you left them, toes pointing out ready for departure. You slide into them with care. No kicking, no rush. There's an old belief, barely whispered now, that how you put on your shoes after bathing would determine the tone of your dreams. Left foot first for clarity. Right foot first for mystery. You pick left. As you begin the slow walk home, yukata tied snugly, the bathhouse shrinks behind you, not in size, but in presence. It's no longer your world. You've returned to the realm of clanging pans, crying infants' letters left unread, and laundry that always seems to multiply. But you carry something with you now, the soft imprint of wood beneath your soles, the memory of silence so deep it changed your posture, the odd serenity of a perfectly folded towel, and you walk a little differently. You breathe more softly. You don't step through puddles as carelessly. You find yourself nodding slightly to passers-by, even if they don't return it, because something about spending 2 hours steeped in warm water and invisible rules has realigned your molecules. You're cleaner, yes, but also calmer, more contained, more quiet. And as you pass beneath the crescent moon, you whisper not to anyone in particular, but perhaps to the night itself. Thank you, just loud enough for the steam to hear. And now, your skin still glows faintly with remembered warmth. Your breath has slowed, and the world outside your window is probably darker than when we began. You've walked the corridors of etiquette, dipped your fingers into a bath, warmed by centuries of quiet ritual, and drifted gently softly through the layers of an Edo evening that asked nothing of you but presence. Let yourself rest now. Let the steam fade the towels dry, and the ghost stories settle back into their corners. Let the hum of the room, real or imagined, carry you the last few steps into sleep. You've earned it. The rules, they can wait. The sandals still neatly aligned, the towel still folded. The bathhouse is behind you now, but its hush remains like a quiet bell that never finishes ringing. Let that echo be your lullaby. Let it carry you into the softest dreams, ones where nothing chases you, where even the ghosts are polite, where the water is always just the right temperature. You're not expected anywhere right now, just here, just quiet, just you drifting, drifting, drifting.